This lecture is the second part of our Changing Industries lecture. This one's about journalism, and it's important that we go over this topic of the changing journalist industry because it really does counteract that of the traditional media systems as they change to new media systems. Television being the last one, and this one being the one that's, I think, a little more prevalent in our political society today. So today we're going to be talking about the society of spectacle and the erosion of journalism, and how we got to where we are today. And everything pretty much changed in 2009. The world you live in now is really as a cause of that. But I really don't just go back to 2009. I've got to go back a little bit farther. I've got to go back to the 1960s, to Guy Debord's essay and manifesto, The Society of the Spectacle. It's important you understand that's where it started because in this Marxist essay, you get an approach as to how we, as a society, have changed to a group of people that are more interested in the spectacle that's around us than the information that was gathered as the way the traditional journalist method would be. You see, a lot of people go to journalism school to be journalists, which means there must be a method. They still do this today, but journalists come with this background that requires them to be curious, seek truth, have integrity and accountability and credibility and ethics. That really comes with journalists. Yet today we seek journalism from any source that we could find it. We find it from sources outside of the mainstream, quote-unquote mainstream media, which is television and newspapers, the systems that are above us, that run by large corporations that bring those news media to us. Often accused of being biased, they are systems of corporations. So people have been turning to more participatory types of news environments like blogs, periscopes, streaming media, homegrown newspaper systems, and those have become prioritized in the last decade or so. But it did have a changing point. But first you have to look at the causes behind those changing points. So in the 1960s, when Guy Debord wrote The Society of Spectacle, he referred to the spectacle as the autocratic reign of the market economy. It's important you understand that because what he's talking about is neoliberalism before it started. Neoliberalism is the idea of the free market, that we all have access to it. And our modern form of journalism is really because of that. Before the idea of the free market, major news media came from major corporations and people had very little access to create their own media. Radio, television, newspapers, they were closed systems. Like Tim Wu said, there was once a master switch. It's the ability for media to be open and then the switch is pulled and it becomes a closed medium where it's only delivered by the few. But participatory media, or your ability to do what I'm doing now, allows us to be information gatherers and deliverers at the same time. And now we have the ability to infiltrate those systems as a free market and create our own news systems. And so that's a big switch we've seen. But this is about how did we come to this point? How did we get to a point where we are now inundated by tons of news media and we've lost trust in the system itself, the larger structure? But I think if you were to read The Society of the Spectacle, you'll see that's because the news media at large is interested in one thing: your ratings, your views, the ability for you to consistently watch that media. And if you consistently watch that media, they're going to feed you what you want to hear because it delivers the information, the ads, that the ads and the companies know that they're going to make money off of your ratings. But even then, things didn't really shift until, I would say, a very specific date. And that specific date happens to be January 15th, 2009. I'll give you a second. Try to see if you can remember what happened on January 15th, 2009. If you can't, you should go check out the movie Sully, because that's the day of the Hudson River safe crash. It was a plane crash in the Hudson, where journalism changed forever. You see, on that day, a man named Jan Kroom happened to be on the ferry going across the Hudson River when a plane crashed in front of him on the Hudson River. And on that day, he tweeted out, "There's a plane in the Hudson. I'm on the ferry going to pick the people up. Crazy." And he posted this image to TwitPic. TwitPic, owned by Twitter at the time, now absorbed, allows the user to retain the rights of the image. Within seconds, the journalists who were racing to the piers on New York could not get a close enough shot. And Giannis happened to grab the very first photo of the accident. He beat journalists there. And what's interesting about that is that rather than the journalists knowing that there was their system worked, they started sourcing the citizens' material. And the birth of citizen journalism began. Now, what's interesting about citizen journalism is that pretty much anyone with a web camera or a cell phone can be a citizen journalist, which means, guess what? You're all citizen journalists. None of you went to school for journalism. Well, maybe some of you are going to school for journalism, but none of you spend your time doing that, but yet you could be in the right place at the right time and become a citizen journalist. But there's a catch. You see, in a response to this, you're going to tell me if you've ever used a YouTube tutorial and which YouTube tutorial you've used to learn something. Changing a tire, figuring out a problem, a math problem, or whatever. Have you ever used YouTube to figure it out? Well, if you do that, could you not learn some techniques of how to frame a shot, like I'm using the rule of thirds here, or how to speak directly to the lens, or even listen to what I'm saying and learn and become that expert via new media? Would that make you the citizen expert? And the question then becomes, if there's citizen journalists, why aren't there citizen surgeons? I mean, hell, if I watch enough YouTube videos, I'm pretty sure I could figure something out, right? Now that statement should be pretty offensive to nurses and anyone in the medical industry, because you can't be a citizen surgeon. You just can't do that by watching YouTube tutorials. Yet you could feel like you could be a citizen journalist by watching YouTube tutorials and participating. And see, there's the problem, is that in this case, it is the audience that decides who becomes or who and what is that type of media. And so in the recent past, the citizen journalism was prioritized. And now, in the last couple of years, we've watched the mainstream media, the big systems, start to mimic that. They've created iReports on CNN. They've created independent video producers that are put on screen. And in doing so, what have they done to the way we watch news? And how do we interpret news? And so what happens is that people start watching the news differently. They start watching it as a spectacle, something that only prioritizes the big events or the accidents or things that are going to make us want to watch. But otherwise, if they're not going to watch, they're not going to be interested in that type of media. And that's problematic because your participation in that enhances and encourages that. So this wasn't a problem, it seems, until recently, within the last election cycle, when people seem to not take Donald Trump's presidency seriously, like CNN or any of the mainstream media outlets, and they used that type of spectacle to constantly promote that material. Later, they then said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that, maybe we changed the way things are, maybe we covered the wrong types of information. But what they were really covering was the thing that the audience wants to see. You have to remember that. This class doesn't really take a political bent, but we do criticize sub-communities, as you will see in the next section. Or we think critical of sub-communities on the internet. But what you need to understand is that people want to watch the things that the news delivers to them. Yet they could simultaneously be critical of that type of media. Which is why some people have been turning to the smaller news outlets. They've turned to people that they seem to trust better or they seem to want to participate with. But in that, the erosion of the journalist method has happened rapidly and fast. And, well, I guess that means the same thing, rapidly and fast. It's happened very quickly to the point where now we have lost trust in the systems and now we're seeking truth everywhere. And by giving those types of doors or giving those types of information systems, people find sources that they like a lot. Whether that be Philip DeFranco or whether that be a news agency that's just sprung up out of nowhere. When you come across those types of sources and those types of blogs, like whether it be like I said, Philip DeFranco or Jezebel or Gizmodo, those types of sites are born of new media. They aren't of maybe the full structure of the old media systems, but they definitely compete with niche news content that feeds the audience exactly what they want to hear. And so what I think is necessary by the end of this class and the end of the semester is that you are more in tune or more aware of the way that news media is in different sectors and how to read that properly. And that's called media literacy or news literacy. And so later in the semester, when we talk about algorithms, you're going to see how algorithms affect the way that we actually access news and how we get information to us. Because the news you see in your Facebook feed, you will often find out events long before the mainstream media will even find it. And that's the second question you'll have as an open-ended part of the quiz, which is, have you ever found out a major news event via social media? Most of you have. And so which one? I'm going to ask you that. And it's important because I found out major celebrity deaths via social media. When I turn on Twitter or I turn on Facebook, that's the first place that I'll find that information, which means my friends and my peers are actually my journalists, rather than any of the structures. So now we've seen that the top level, the mainstream, has eroded to citizen journalists, which has eroded to peer journalism. And in that case, how do we know where the truth is? Well, that's something you have to discover over the course of time. In this class, you're just going to become more media literate, and in becoming more media literate, it makes you a better consumer, makes you a better observer of how information is distributed. Because when Giannis Crumbs was at the shore and taking that picture on the ferry, later that day, he sold that picture to 2 different newspapers, one to the Charlotte Observer and one to the LA Times, and they paid him a lot of money for his photo because he was first. And that's all it took. It wasn't even that great of a photo, as you'll see. It was a vertical photo with an iPhone 3 or a 4, and it was fuzzy through the window, but yet he was there, and the journalists were not. And that's what changes everything. So here we are. So your next assignment, as we move to Module 3, so once you pass this quiz, Module 3 will open, and your next assignment is to make a meme. And I mean that. You're going to go to a meme generator site. Some of them are not safe for work, okay? That's very important. You do this when you're obviously not sitting at work. You're going to go there and you're going to generate a meme. You can't really get this wrong. I mean, if you get it wrong, that's good, because then we could correct you through it. You're going to do 2 memes during the course of the next little bit. So first was vlogging, so you understand what this platform is like, what it's like to speak to a camera, which is okay if you get that wrong too, because it's a learning process. The next one, we're going to make memes, and then we're going to make another meme, and you can make it anyway. I'm going to give you a site to make a meme, and you can make it any way you like. Try to be original and creative. That's obviously the way to get through the class as well. Be original and creative and post your meme for everybody to see. I'm going to put it on a discussion board. Please be appropriate. Do not put any harsh or negative material. Obviously, memes can be funny or dark or snarky or dank, and you're allowed to do that. You can be as funny as you want, but please do not be ultra offensive. Okay, some of them obviously will end up being offensive because that's how memes are. But please keep in mind you are working within a public environment and working with your classmates. But don't think of this as a competition, but think of this as a way of being creative around your classmates. But what I want you to get from this is you are participating in the participatory media environment of meme creation. Trust me, the Society of the Spectacle, the Erosion of Journalism, and meme creation all tie together, which we'll see over the course of Module 2.